My name is Marlene Cornelius, and I'm also a part of Christ United Methodist Church. And Cora asked me to give reflections of Martin Luther King and talk a little bit about justice ministry at my church. I remember going to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak a couple of times at the State House on High Street here in Columbus.
Wow.
He stood up high on the State House steps facing Woolworth store across the street and addressed the large standing crowd. I also remember riding on a float in a local civil rights march. The truck we rode in was made to look like my friends and I were behind prison bars, and a large sign said, "Black in America," to represent how we felt living in this country in the 1960s. Life wasn't fair. One example was the Woolworth store downtown, where Black people shopped regularly. If you were hungry, you were allowed to go stand at the end of the food counter and order food to go, but not allowed to sit down and eat at the counter. I remember how it made me feel. Not good enough. Fortunately, I also remember when the nonviolent boycotts and sit-ins began across the nation to protest these injustices. The Nashville Woolworths was the first food counter where college students held a nonviolent sit-in. A bright young man named John Lewis participated in that sit-in, and he was even arrested. It was probably his first time when he was arrested for good trouble. That event was a turning point there and in Columbus too. Bear with me. Because people here decided to boycott our Woolworths. One of the main downtown bus stops was in front of Woolworths. During the boycott, bus riders, and other shoppers too, but the bus riders refused to enter the store while waiting at the bus stop. Woolworths lost a lot of money and eventually learned that green was more important than black. Many years later, I took my granddaughter to lunch at the Woolworths in Nashville, where that first sit-in was held. Today, it is a restaurant and museum where they welcome you and ask if you want to sit at a table or sit at the famous counter. It was good to see that progress while I explained to my young granddaughter how unfair things used to be and how even today we must continue to work for justice in this country. In terms of justice ministry at our church, I was new to the congregation and my previous church was predominantly Black, so with Christ Church being mixed, I wondered how I would fit in. So I was quiet at first, but when I joined the choir, I began to develop friendships and learn that if you share your stories about who you are, it is easier to connect with others. When I attended the Justice Ministry Conference in Cincinnati this summer, we practiced one-on-ones with people all over the country. Sharing our stories helped me to see how much we have in common. Even sitting at the conference at a table where Gloria and I were the only Columbus people seated was a good experience. I learned that it's not about our differences, it's about listening, sharing, and working on goals we have in common. Now that I have built some relationships, I find it easier to bring up BREAD events with my church members. For example, at choir rehearsal, someone asked us to pray for the residents of Colonial Village apartments near our church, and I was able to chime in and comment how this year BREAD is focusing on affordable housing. It wasn't a big presentation, but just that small update, so when I approach them later about BREAD, we will already have a personal connection about the issue of affordable housing. Thank you.
Good.